If I had known that blowing out the candles on my 75th birthday cake would be followed by being thrown out like a piece of trash, I would have let the wax drip and burned the whole damn thing down. My son Richard leaned toward me across the dinner table, his voice low enough that only I could hear it but sharp enough to slice through my spine. "When will your time finally come? You're just a burden to us." The laughter and clinking glasses around us didn't pause. They didn't hear him. But I did. I sat there with the smile still frozen on my face, the kind old ladies wear when they don't want to ruin the party, and swallowed the bile rising in my throat. His wife Elaine clinked her glass against mine a little too hard. "To Evelyn," she beamed, "the woman who raised a good man." My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the wine. A good man? By the time I made it back to my bedroom, the wine in my stomach had turned to acid. I needed to sit, think, breathe. But when I opened my closet, everything was gone. Every single one of my things. Clothes, keepsakes, even the ceramic dog my late husband gave me on our 10th anniversary was packed into garbage bags and lined up like trash in the front hallway. I blinked. My brain couldn't catch up. What? What is this? Richard didn't even look up from his phone. "You're moving out, Mom. Tonight." Elaine chimed in from the kitchen, not missing a beat as she packed leftovers. "We've arranged for you to stay with that friend of yours." "What's her name?" "The one who doesn't have stairs?" I didn't speak. Not yet. Because if I had, I would have screamed. Instead, I walked out. Slowly. Deliberately. My legs trembling under me. The cold night air slapped me harder than Richard ever did. I stood outside my own house, barefoot, holding a trash bag with my toothbrush and a wrinkled cardigan, and realized something. They weren't just tired of me. They wanted me gone. I didn't even cry. Not then. There was something more hollow than heartbreak blooming in my chest. Something colder. I'd given them everything. After Harold died, I put the house in Richard's name. I thought it would make things easier. I thought I was protecting what was left of our family. I thought I could trust my own son. But they were already planning my erasure, down to the moment I'd step out their door, thinking it was still mine. I stood under the porch light for 5 more minutes. Richard didn't come out. Elaine didn't call after me. The door didn't creak open with second thoughts. No one even watched me go. Just before I turned and walked toward the street, I looked up at the attic window, my sewing room. The light was still on. I imagined Elaine's new office, or maybe a yoga nook with potted plants and cheap enlightenment. They'd already taken it in their minds. I didn't feel anger yet. Not rage. Just empty clarity. It wasn't about age, or space, or convenience. It was greed. Cold, calculated greed. And they thought I wouldn't fight. They thought I'd go quietly. I walked down the driveway without looking back, my feet freezing against the pavement, my breath visible in the air. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Margot laid out extra blankets on her pull-out couch, bustled around the kitchen like I was her guest, instead of a woman who'd just been thrown out like spoiled milk. She made tea, jasmine, my favorite, and kept asking softly if I needed anything. I kept saying no, because I wasn't going to cry. Not over them, not in front of her. She sat across from me, her legs curled under her like we were 20 again, and just back from a bad date. "You're too calm," she finally said, looking at me over the rim of her mug. "I'm tired," I said. "Of what?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Of being surprised." She didn't ask for details. Margot had known me too long, knew when I was holding something in, and when I was holding something back to protect myself. "They packed your things in trash bags?" she asked, after a long silence. I nodded. That detail seemed to catch in her throat. "Jesus, Evelyn." "I know." What I didn't tell her yet, not that night, was that I never really gave up the house. Not completely. When Harold died, I had transferred the house title into Richard's name for estate simplification, just like the lawyer advised. But I'd kept the survivorship clause. It was buried in the fine print. I remembered Harold's voice even now saying, "You never know who people turn into when money's on the table." At the time, I thought it was a silly precaution. Now it was the only thing holding me together. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought they owned it all. But I still had the deed. I still had the paper trail. It was just a matter of checking the facts. I opened my bag and took out the little folder I always carried with me when I traveled. Insurance cards, emergency contacts, and the original documents from Harold's lawyer, still in their sleeve. I flipped to the clause I remembered. There it was. Right of survivorship. My name was still etched into the contract like a quiet witness. You okay? Margot asked gently. I nodded, holding the page between my fingers like it was a lifeline. I think I'm better than okay. You're plotting something, she said, watching me. I know that face. I looked up. I'm remembering who I am. She leaned back and grinned. Good, because they clearly forgot. That night, I slept on her couch wrapped in an afghan my mother crocheted 50 years ago. It smelled like lavender and old wood. I kept the deed document under my pillow like a relic, not because I didn't trust Margot, but because I didn't trust myself not to wake up and wonder if it had all been a dream. In the morning, over burnt toast and yesterday's newspaper, I finally said it out loud. I'm going to see Harold's lawyer. Margot raised her eyebrows. That old fox still alive? His daughter took over the firm, I said. But I called the number this morning. She's agreed to see me. Noon. She smiled. Want me to drive? No, I said, pulling the cardigan tighter around me. I want to do this one myself. The woman who walked out of Margot's house wasn't the same woman who'd stood barefoot in her own driveway 12 hours earlier. Because I wasn't a guest anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was a homeowner. And I was coming back. The funny thing about betrayal is how it doesn't usually come in one big blow. It trickles in, slowly, until one day, you realize you've been drowning for years. I hadn't wanted to see it before. Maybe I didn't want to believe my own son was capable of it. But when I think back, the signs had always been there. Whispers behind doors, phone calls that stopped the moment I entered a room. That look Richard gave Elaine when they thought I wasn't paying attention, tight-lipped and smug, like they were in on something I wasn't. I'd chalked it up to marital secrets. Private business. I was wrong. They were waiting me out like a bad tenant. You really think we can get 6 figures with the old witch still in there? I remember hearing Elaine whisper into her phone one night while she stood by the back door. She's 75, Richard. How long could she possibly have left? I stood in the hallway, frozen. I remember thinking maybe she meant someone else. Maybe it was a joke. But then Richard had walked in behind her, placed a hand on her back, and said, once she's out, we can gut the place. Flip it in under 6 weeks. Elaine smirked. The asset's already liquid. We just need to evict the liability. The liability was me. I never confronted them. Not then. What was the point? They would have just denied it, told me I'd misunderstood, gaslit me until I questioned my own hearing. So I filed that moment away. Like all the others. Like when Elaine started accidentally throwing away my mail, or when Richard changed the locks one weekend and claimed it was for security. They were grooming me for removal. They just didn't think I'd notice, or fight back. Now I knew what they were after. My home. The same one Harold and I built from scratch when we had nothing but a contractor's discount and a dream. The garden Richard was born in. The fireplace Harold laid brick by brick with his own hands. I sat in the back of the cab on the way to the lawyer's office and stared out at the streets I used to walk. Everything felt foreign, like I didn't belong in my own town anymore. Like the world had moved on, while I was busy folding everyone else's laundry and pretending not to mind being invisible. The lawyer's office was clean and cold. White walls, chrome fixtures, a little too modern. But then she walked in, Sarah Langley. Her father had been Harold's attorney, and now she was sitting across from me, looking at the very same deed he'd drawn up years ago. She flipped through the documents with quick, careful hands. You know, she said without looking up, they probably think you signed everything away. I know, I replied. She paused, tapped the paper. But you didn't. Your name's still on the title, thanks to the survivorship clause. Your son has no legal right to sell or transfer without your signature. I nodded slowly. So the house, it's still mine. She met my eyes. It's always been yours. It was the first time in 3 days that my body felt solid again, like my bones remembered who they belonged to. Can they be evicted? I asked, my voice steady. Sarah smiled, calm, professional, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. She had seen this kind of betrayal before. Absolutely. I stood up, smoother than I had in years. As I left her office, I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. But I did feel armed. They had played the long game, thinking I was too old, too slow, too dependent. They forgot I had buried a husband, raised 2 boys. Mark lives 3 towns over, but we've drifted. And I'd survived every kind of silence known to a woman who gives too much and asks for too little. They wanted a house, but I was the foundation. I didn't go back to that street again for a while. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. They were confident. Too confident. The kind of arrogance that comes when people believe the paperwork's already on their side. They didn't check the fine print. They didn't check me. Back at Margot's, I kept moving. Slowly. Quietly. The way a woman who's been underestimated her whole life learns to move. I called Mark, Richard's younger brother, my second son. The one who never asked for anything. Never raised his voice. Never treated me like I was disposable. He picked up on the second ring. Mom? Hi, sweetheart. My voice didn't shake. I could use your help. That was all I had to say. Within an hour, he was at Margot's front door with a bag of groceries and a concerned look on his face. He stepped in, looked around, and said gently, "You okay?" I almost said yes. That old habit of pretending. But I didn't. I'm getting there. We sat at Margot's tiny kitchen table while she poured us both a cup of that cinnamon tea she keeps for special occasions. Apparently, betrayal counts. I didn't tell Mark everything. Not yet. I told him I was staying here for a bit, that things at the house had gotten complicated. That Richard and Elaine were planning some renovations I wasn't comfortable with. Mark frowned. He didn't even call me. That's when I knew he had no idea what they'd done. I watched his face closely. The confusion. The quiet disappointment. You know, he said slowly, he's been different since Elaine. Not mean, just hollow. That was his way of saying what I'd always feared. That Richard, my eldest, had turned into someone we didn't recognize anymore. Mark leaned forward. What do you need, Mom? I smiled. Just your truck, and maybe a bit of muscle. I've got some papers to move, files, boxes, nothing heavy. He nodded immediately. Say the word. I didn't tell him the files were evidence. I didn't tell him the boxes were full of documents proving my ownership, my years of mortgage payments, my taxes, my receipts. I didn't tell him the truck was for storing it all safely out of Richard's reach. Let them think I was drifting. That I had nowhere to go and nothing left to hold on to. Meanwhile, I was setting up the board, and every quiet move I made was one step closer to checkmate. That afternoon, Mark helped me rent a small storage unit on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a dry, locked space where I could keep my proof. We labeled the bins: deeds, tax records, mortgage history, photos, letters. I held one envelope a little longer. Inside were 2 letters, one from Harold the week after we bought the house, another from my father the day I turned 30. Don't let them take what you built, he had written in his slanted old man script. Not the house, not your dignity. I placed it in the top bin. Mark didn't ask questions. He just hugged me tight before he left. If you need anything, money, help, a place, I'm here. I mean it, Mom. And for the first time in days, my eyes burned. Not because I was weak, but because I remembered I wasn't alone. Not completely. Richard and Elaine had the house. But I had the truth. And the truth was already packed and locked away, waiting. I hadn't stepped foot in a library in years. Not since Harold passed. Not since the world around me started shrinking to four walls and the clatter of silverware I never bought. But that morning, I walked through the front doors of the Belmont Public Library like a woman on a mission. Because I was. The air still smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. The carpet was just as faded. Everything was still in its place, except me. This time, I wasn't here to pass the time. I was here to remember who I'd been before I forgot myself. I nodded at the young man behind the reference desk. I need access to property records and historical files. He blinked, clearly surprised by the clarity in my voice. What exactly are you looking for? Proof, I said, of what's mine. I took a seat in the back corner, where it was quiet, where I wouldn't be interrupted. I spread out old documents, letters Harold had filed away, and I'd forgotten. I even found copies of utility bills in my name, going back decades. All that history, all that evidence of a life lived, and not a single corner of it included Richard's name until 2 years ago. I copied everything, scanned each one into a USB drive I picked up for $5 at the pharmacy. Then I went online. Search, click, save, print, repeat. It all came back faster than I expected. How to navigate a PDF, how to cross-reference dates. Harold always said, "You're smarter than you let on, Evie. You just got used to playing small." Not anymore. I stayed until the lights dimmed and the speakers clicked on with a polite, "The library will be closing in 10 minutes." I walked out with a tote bag full of copies and a chest that felt 5 pounds lighter. At Margot's, she had soup waiting and her TV tuned to the evening news. "You've been out all day," she said. "Where were you?" "Digging," she raised an eyebrow. "Grave or gold?" I grinned, the first real grin I'd managed since my birthday. "Both." After dinner, I laid everything out on the kitchen table. Neatly stacked documents, post-it notes, and one binder I'd labeled in thick black ink. Ownership, Evelyn H. Inside it, I placed everything: the deed with my name, the survivorship clause, the letters, bills, witness statements, even a photo of Harold in front of the house with the sold sign. It was all there: the story, the history, the truth, not just legal, personal. Because the house wasn't just property. It was the last thing I had that hadn't already been taken or twisted. I looked down at it all and realized something painful. For years, I'd let Richard and Elaine chip away at me. Little comments, little shoves, dismissing my opinions, ignoring my birthday cards, asking when I'd be ready to downsize, and I let them. Because I thought it was love. Because I thought love meant giving. Even when it meant erasing myself. But sitting there, with my own life spread out in facts and ink and memory, I remembered. Love without respect isn't love. It's convenience. And I wasn't going to be their convenience anymore. I closed the binder, clicked it shut, and wrote one more word on the front. Under my name. Reclaimed. They had no idea what was coming. And for the first time in years, neither did I. But it wasn't fear I felt. It was forward motion. And that was more than enough. They thought I was staying away out of shame. That's the mistake they all make, thinking silence means surrender. But I was never quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was watching. And now, I had front row seats to my own heist. Every afternoon that week, I parked Margot's Buick at the corner of Sycamore and Elm, just far enough to go unnoticed, but close enough to see my house. Yes, my house. Richard and Elaine paraded buyers in and out like it was their God-given kingdom. I watched from behind my sunglasses as strangers pointed to my garden, leaned against my railing, and nodded approvingly in my living room. Elaine had the audacity to stand on the porch in a fitted blazer, like she was selling a listing in Beverly Hills. "You can't buy soul like this," she told one couple. I actually laughed out loud. The soul she was referring to? That was mine. The creak in the hallway floor? Harold's work. The built-in bookshelf in the back bedroom? Took me 3 months of sanding and swearing. They hadn't earned a damn inch of it. I watched as they swapped out furniture, staged throw pillows that looked like hotel decor, even painted over the soft yellow kitchen walls I had chosen after Harold passed, just to bring some light back in. They wanted it sterile, unrecognizable, so no one would remember the woman who made it a home. But I remembered. And now I had all the paperwork to back it up. Still, I wasn't ready to move just yet. Not until I saw exactly how deep their confidence ran. On Friday, I watched Richard shake hands with a couple who looked barely out of college. She was pregnant. He wore a button-up 2 sizes too tight, like he was playing house. They walked out holding a folder. And I saw it. A purchase agreement. My stomach dropped. I leaned forward, forehead nearly touching the steering wheel. They weren't just listing the house anymore. They were days, maybe hours, from selling it. I gripped the edge of the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. For the first time since this started, I felt panic. Actual, sharp, rising panic. They were getting away with it. And I was sitting in a car, playing detective. I pulled out my phone, nearly dropped it from shaking hands, and called Sarah, the lawyer. Voicemail. I hung up, dialed again. Straight to voicemail. I texted her. Urgent. Buyers have purchase agreement, need to stop sale immediately. I didn't wait for her reply. I started the engine, heart racing. This wasn't theory anymore. It wasn't planning or documentation or quiet revenge. It was now. I made one more loop around the block before I left, just to see my house from every angle. And I saw them, Richard and Elaine, standing in the driveway with champagne flutes, celebrating. They thought they'd won, but they'd popped the cork too soon. Because the sale might have been drafted, but the title still had my name. And the moment Sarah got my message, the brakes were going to screech. I just hoped it wasn't too late. Because if I had to walk back into that house to stop it myself, I would. Even if I had to stand on the lawn and scream it loud enough for the whole damn neighborhood to hear, you don't sell what you don't own. They could pour their wine and shake their hands and pretend they had it in the bag. But I was about to pull the rug out from under them. And this time, I wouldn't be watching from the curb. I'd be walking straight through the front door, with fire in my pocket and a title in my hand. I didn't sleep that night. The shadows on Margot's ceiling twisted into signatures and sale contracts. Every creak in the house sounded like the echo of a moving van pulling into my driveway. My driveway. I'd been playing chess in silence, waiting for the right move. But now the clock hit red. It was time to flip the board. At 7:01 a.m., I called Sarah again. This time she answered, her voice groggy. Ms. Harper? It's Evelyn. They've got a buyer. Pause. Then a rustle, like she was already getting out of bed. Purchase agreement? In hand. I saw them leave with it myself. Do you know the name of the buyer? No, but I've got the address, the agent's info, and your name is already on speed dial. What do I need to do? She didn't hesitate. You need to file a title claim immediately. We'll submit an affidavit asserting contested ownership. That'll put a freeze on the sale. Do it. I'll need you to sign in person. I'll be there in an hour. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in a glass office downtown, with a pen in my hand and the weight of every betrayal behind my signature. Sarah slid the papers toward me. This will initiate a temporary hold on the title. The county will flag it as disputed. No title transfer can occur until the matter is resolved. I stared at the form. Disputed. Such a clean little word for a knife in the back. I signed. It was the first signature in months that actually meant something. Not a birthday card. Not a check for groceries. Not a fake smile on a thank you note. This one? This one said, I'm still here. By noon, I got the call. Evelyn, it's Sarah. I spoke to the county clerk. The title's officially frozen. No transfer, no escrow. Nothing moves forward without your consent. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I exhaled for the first time in days. Thank you, I said. They're going to be confused, she warned gently. Probably angry. Let them be both, I said. They've had enough time being comfortable. And sure enough, just after 5 p.m., Richard called. He hadn't spoken to me since my birthday. Mom, he said, too quickly, too cheerfully. Hey, I just heard there's been a mix-up with the title. A mix-up. like I had accidentally tripped into my own legal rights. I didn't bother pretending. No mix-up, Richard. The house is still mine. Has been. You never had the right to sell it. Silence. Then he chuckled. Not because he thought it was funny, but because that's what people do when their ego starts to crack. Mom, we put so much work into this. You mean painting over my walls and staging my furniture? He paused again. I thought this was taken care of. I thought you signed it over. You thought. That was your first mistake. I let the silence stretch. Then I added, calm and clear. I saw the purchase agreement. I watched from the street. You don't get to sell what you never owned, Richard. He tried again, voice rising just a little. We have a buyer lined up. Elaine's furious. This puts us in a terrible position. I leaned back in Margot's chair, feeling something close to satisfaction settle in my bones. Then I suggest you start packing, because you're in my house. He hung up. No apology. No remorse. Just the click of a man realizing the game had changed. Let them stew. Let them panic. Because I wasn't outside anymore. I was back on the board. And this time, I was the one making the moves. I always believed the truth doesn't need a microphone. Just a little time and the right set of ears. And it didn't take long. By Tuesday, the whispers started. Margot was the first to tell me. She'd overheard two women at the bakery muttering about that house on Elm, and something about an elderly woman being pushed out by her own family. I didn't say anything at first, just kept buttering my toast. Then she looked at me and said, I didn't tell them. But someone did. Good. Let them talk. I wasn't looking for pity. I didn't want sympathy casseroles or weepy apologies. But I did want the story told. Not the sanitized one Richard was probably spinning. The real one. The one where a woman gives her life to a home, and then her son tries to sell it while she's still breathing. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Harold died. I called the local newspaper. No names, I said. No drama. Just the truth. The young reporter who answered sounded surprised. Wait, you're saying you were kicked out of your home, but you still legally own it? That's correct. And they tried to sell it? They're still trying. But now it's complicated, because I fought back. There was a pause. Then the click of a keyboard. Would you be willing to talk about it? I already am. The next day, an article appeared online. Just a short one. No names, like I asked. But the headline said enough. Elderly woman blocks home sale after sudden eviction by family. It spread. Not viral, not explosive. But Belmont's a small town. The kind where everyone thinks they know you, until they don't. The kind where lawn care gossip turns into courtroom speculation overnight. By Thursday, 3 people had called Margot's house just to check in. By Friday, Richard called again. I didn't answer. Let him sweat. Instead, I opened my laptop and watched the article's comment section grow. Shameful. Who does that to their mother? Hopes she sues the hell out of them. Each one was a little spark. And suddenly, the cold I'd felt since my birthday began to thaw. People were starting to see, not the version Elaine wore like perfume. Glossy, curated, Instagram-ready. But the real story. The quiet kind of cruelty that gets covered with smiles at open houses. I printed the article, highlighted one line. Ownership was preserved due to a survivorship clause, which her family reportedly ignored. Reportedly. No, they ignored it completely. Because they never thought I'd use it. They thought I'd go away quietly, fade like wallpaper under a new coat of paint. But I wasn't wallpaper. I was the beam in the wall. And now I was shaking the house from the inside out. Later that evening, Margot came in with a tray of tea and sat beside me without a word. She handed me her phone. A message from her daughter. Mom, did you see the story about Mrs. Evelyn? Tell her she's a legend. I didn't feel like a legend. I felt tired. But it was the good kind, the kind you earn. I set down the tea and looked out the window, where the clouds were pulling in slow over the rooftops. A storm was coming. Only this time, I wasn't the one getting soaked. Let Richard and Elaine hide behind their curtains, because the town was starting to see them now, and I'd only just begun to raise my voice. I used to flinch at my own reflection, not because of wrinkles or age or anything silly like that, because every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone shrinking. Someone too polite, too quiet. Someone trained for decades to keep her hands folded, her opinions measured, her anger swallowed whole. But now I was practicing the speech. I stood in Margot's spare bedroom, facing the tall mirror near the dresser, and said it again. "You kicked the owner out on her birthday." My voice didn't shake. Not the first time. Not the third. Not when I said it through clenched teeth. Not when I said it with nothing but cold, steady calm. Because I needed to be ready. Sarah said the case could escalate. That once the bank got spooked and the buyer pulled out, Richard might try to challenge the claim. "He's arrogant enough to think he can talk his way out of it," she warned. "Are you prepared for a confrontation?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Not just prepared, I'm waiting for it." Back in Margot's house, I rehearsed. Not for Richard, not even for court, if it came to that. For me. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to someone else's cruelty. I was writing the damn script. Your name's not on the deed, Richard. You tried to erase me from my own story. You don't get to claim something built on someone else's hands. I said each line louder than the last. Then I lowered my voice again. Controlled. Precise. You loved the house, not the person who made it a home. Margot walked by once and peeked in. You practicing for the Oscars? I smirked. Courtroom drama. Real life version. Well, you're nailing it. She meant it too. Because she saw what I was finally willing to admit. I had spent a lifetime being reasonable in rooms that treated me like I didn't exist. I remembered every Thanksgiving when Richard barely looked up from his phone. Every Christmas when Elaine gave me dollar store lotion sets while I handed them wrapped checks. Every birthday where I got the card late, if at all. The signs had been there, and I had let it slide, because that's what mothers are told to do. Be patient, be giving, be understanding. What no one says is this: there's a difference between being kind and being disposable. I wasn't disposable. I was deliberate. And now I was deliberate, with every word. Later that night, I opened my binder again, ownership, Evelyn H., and slid a new document inside, a notarized affidavit from the contractor who had installed our roof 25 years ago. Still alive, still sharp, and willing to confirm that Harold and I were the sole owners. People like Richard think memory fades with age, he told me on the phone. Good thing some of us still remember the truth. I slept better that night, not because the battle was over, but because I knew I wouldn't be the one backing down. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror one last time and whispered the line again. You thought I wouldn't fight. Then I smiled. Not wide, not sweet, just enough to show the woman staring back at me knew exactly who she was again. Let them come, with lawyers or lies or fake apologies. I had the documents. I had the truth. I had the voice. And this time, I wouldn't be speaking from the hallway. I'd be speaking from the center of the room, where I belonged. The next move wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It didn't need to be. It was just one envelope, one signature, one knock on a retired sheriff's door. Margot drove me there. Why him? She asked as we pulled up to the little ranch house with the American flag drooping on the porch. Because he owes Harold, I said simply. Sheriff Tom Beals had retired 10 years ago, but he remembered me the moment I stepped out of the car. Evelyn Harper, he said, tipping an imaginary hat. Haven't seen you since Harold's funeral. Thought you moved out of town. No, I said calmly. They just moved me out of the house. He blinked. I watched the confusion settle into something colder, something he recognized. Ah, he said. Family problems. Not family, I replied. Parasites. I handed him the folder. Affidavit of ownership. Legal claim filed. Request for assistance in preparing an eviction notice. He flipped through it like a man who used to write citations for a living and still hadn't forgotten how. You're well within your rights, he muttered. And this clause here, survivorship? That's ironclad. I need someone to deliver the notice when the time comes, I said. Not now, but soon. Tom looked up at me, eyes narrowed. You want a formal walkout? I want it quiet, legal, final. He closed the folder. I'll help you. We shook hands. That was it. No dramatic vows, no courtroom threats. Just quiet steel, exchanging grips in a driveway. By the time Margot and I got back to her house, the sun had dipped and the kitchen smelled like ginger cookies. You're different now, she said, handing me one. How so? You used to ask for permission. Now you're just doing it. I took a bite. Maybe I forgot I never needed to ask in the first place. That night, I opened the envelope from Sarah. Inside were the drafted court documents, motion to evict occupants, non-title holders filed, dated, ready for submission. I traced my name at the bottom. Evelyn H. Harper, still standing. Across town, I imagined Richard and Elaine were poring over spreadsheets, trying to figure out why the sale froze, who told, what went wrong. I almost pitied them, but only almost. Because here's the thing, they didn't fail because I fought back. They failed because they never thought I would. And now, I had the full force of the law behind me, the weight of memory, and a sheriff who once carried Harold's coffin. They had champagne flutes and a closing date that would never come. Let them make phone calls. Let them try to fix what they broke. But the hinges had come off the door the night they kicked me out. And now I held the only key that mattered. Later, as I filed the notice into my binder, Margot leaned on the door frame. You're getting close, I nodded. Next week, she smiled gently. How do you feel? I paused. Not angry, not bitter, just ready. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's paperwork. Sometimes it's the woman you underestimated all your life, walking up the front steps with the law in her purse. And when I came back, it wouldn't be with a suitcase. It'd be with a court order, and a retired sheriff beside me, and the quiet power of a woman who remembered who she was, just in time to take it all back. It was a Thursday. Cold, bright. The kind of air that makes your lungs sting if you breathe too fast. I liked it that way, kept you alert, made you feel alive. I wore Harold's coat. Wool, gray, a little frayed at the cuffs, but it still fit like armor. Inside the inner pocket was the court order, tucked flat, folded once. Final notice of eviction. Richard and Elaine Harper, non-title occupants. Effective immediately. Tom Beals showed up 10 minutes early, punctual like all ex-lawmen. He wore his old belt, still held a clipboard like it was gospel. You sure you want to do this today? He asked, stepping up onto Margot's porch. No, I said. But I'm done waiting. Margot hugged me goodbye at the door. I felt her hand linger at my back, steady, firm. Go get your house, she whispered. We drove in silence. The neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered. The houses tighter together. The trees barer. Or maybe I was just seeing everything more clearly. When we turned onto Elm, I saw it, my house. And it still took my breath for a second. Because no matter what they tried to repaint or rearrange, it was still mine. It remembered me. Tom pulled up right in front, killed the engine. You want me to knock? I looked at the door, my door. No, I said. I do. I stepped out before I could talk myself out of it. Walked straight up the walkway with my boots hitting the concrete, hard enough to feel like thunder. No hesitation. Not this time. I knocked 3 times. I heard movement inside. A curtain fluttered. Then the door creaked open. Elaine. Her smile was automatic, rehearsed, until she saw who it was. Evelyn, she said, blinking. You can't just... I held up the paper before she could finish. You're being served. Tom stepped forward behind me, clipped the notice to her storm door like a badge. This is a legal order, he said, voice firm but calm. You and Mr. Harper are to vacate the premises within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in forced removal under county law. Elaine's face collapsed in stages. Confusion, anger, fear. She backed away without a word. And then Richard appeared in the hallway. He froze when he saw me. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped inside, just far enough to stand in the threshold, not one step more. "I built this house with your father," I said. "You sold it like it was junk on the curb." His eyes flickered. "Mom, please." "No," I said, calm, clear, cold. "You kicked me out on my birthday, packed my life into garbage bags, called me a burden." Elaine made a sound, like she wanted to object, but knew better. "This house is not yours," I continued. "It never was. And now the law agrees." Richard looked at the paper like it might disappear if he blinked hard enough. "I didn't think you'd go this far," he said. "That's the difference between you and me," I replied. "You never thought I'd go anywhere." Tom nodded toward the sidewalk. "I suggest you start packing." I turned and walked back down the path, the wind catching the edge of my coat like a curtain falling on a play. No one followed. No one begged. Because the show was over. At the curb, I looked up one more time. My house. My porch. My swing. I had never raised my voice. I hadn't needed to. Because when you knock with truth in your hand, and dignity in your bones, even the doors you were thrown out of open for you again. This time, on your terms. I didn't stay to watch them pack. I didn't need to. Some things are better unseen. I already knew the tears would be performative, the excuses hollow, and the boxes too full of things that were never really theirs to begin with. But 3 days later, Sunday afternoon, I returned. Margot drove. She insisted, said she didn't want me stepping back alone. "You go in strong," she said, hand on the gear shift, "but come out free." The street was quiet, except for the moving truck, parked crooked, back doors open. And there, in the middle of my lawn, was Richard, sitting on a curb like a teenager who missed curfew, elbows on knees. That same beige sweater I bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. Still wore it like I hadn't been garbage to him just weeks before. Elaine was pacing near the front porch, barking into her phone. I said we need another day. She can't just... This wasn't supposed to happen. I almost smiled. Supposed to happen? No, what was supposed to happen was me dying quietly in a back room while they flipped the house and toasted with other people's money. What happened was justice. I stepped out before Richard even noticed me. But the second he looked up, his face crumpled. He stood. "Mom." I stopped halfway up the walk, close enough for him to see my eyes, far enough that he couldn't touch me. He opened his mouth again. "I know I made a mistake. We panicked. Elaine, she thought maybe you'd want to move in with Margot long term. We weren't thinking clearly." I said nothing. "Let us stay," he continued. "Not in the house. Just the garage. Just while we figure things out." I finally spoke. "You want to live in the garage of the house you stole from me?" His jaw clenched. "I'm not saying we were right. I'm just saying we don't have anywhere else." "Neither did I said. "The night you put my life in garbage bags and left me standing barefoot on the porch." He looked away, and I took one more step forward. "You don't miss me," I said quietly. "You miss my resources, my address, my retirement fund. You miss my silence." "Please," he whispered. "You can beg," I said, steady. "From the curb." His shoulders dropped. Elaine hung up the phone, glared at me like I was the intruder. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her eyes said it all. How dare I not disappear? How dare I rise? But I didn't meet her glare. I looked past them both, to the porch. My porch. The swing was gone. Probably tossed or sold, but I'd replace it. I'd sand new wood, pick new cushions. This time, no initials, no nostalgia, just comfort. Margot stepped beside me. She didn't speak either, just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, like a quiet witness. I turned one last time to Richard. "Take what's yours," I said, "which isn't much, and go." He nodded, but didn't move. That was the last moment I gave him. I walked up the steps. The key in my pocket trembled slightly, either from my fingers or the cold. but it slid in clean. The lock clicked. The door opened. And I stepped back into my home. No fanfare, no applause, just the creak of the floor I'd walked on for decades. The walls greeting me like an old friend. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to see them leave. I'd already reclaimed the only thing that mattered: me. The first thing I did when I stepped inside wasn't cry. I thought I might. I thought the weight of it all would crash down the moment I crossed the threshold. But no, I stood in the foyer, shut the door behind me, and breathed. And the house, it breathed back. I could feel it, like the walls exhaled after holding their breath for weeks. As if they'd been waiting too, watching strangers stomp around, pretending to own something they never even respected. It didn't smell like home. Not yet. It smelled like lavender plugins and cheap linen spray. Elaine's effort to make everything Instagram ready. She'd even swapped out the curtains for something gauzy and sterile. I walked to the kitchen. The good tea was gone, the butter dish was gone. But the little chip on the counter, the one Harold made when he dropped the toaster back in '96, still there, still mine. I ran my fingers across it, smiled, and whispered, "Still standing, huh?" Just like me. I moved from room to room like a woman reclaiming her body. Slowly, quietly, deliberately. They'd changed what they could, but not what mattered. The grooves in the floor, where Harold's boots had worn the wood thin. The faded outline of my old china cabinet against the wall. The uneven closet door that stuck in the spring. They couldn't erase those things, because they were written into the bones. I opened the windows, one by one. Let the cold air in. Let the pretense out. Every breeze carried away a lie. I stripped the bed, tossed Elaine's synthetic comforter into a trash bag, and remade it with my own quilt, the one I'd kept in Margot's linen closet all this time. Folded with care, still smelled faintly of lemon. By the time the sun set, I had a small pile of things at the door, labeled, "Throw away." Not because I was cleaning, because I was purging. The house didn't need to forget what happened, neither did I. But it needed to know who it belonged to again. That night, I made soup. Simple. Lentils, carrots, bay leaf. I sat at my own table, in my own chair, sipping quietly while the floor groaned under the weight of healing. No one interrupted. No one asked for favors. No one rolled their eyes because I was talking too long. It was quiet, and I wasn't lonely. I was whole. Around 8 p.m., Mark called. "Hey, Mom. You good?" "I'm better than good," I said. He hesitated. He called me. "Richard." "I'm not surprised. He said he didn't expect you to go through with it." I laughed. Soft. Tired. Real. He still doesn't know me. Mark was quiet then. "Proud of you." My throat tightened. "Thanks, baby," I said. "That means more than you know." We talked a few more minutes. I told him about the soup. He told me the kids wanted to come by soon. "Maybe Thanksgiving?" he asked. I looked around the kitchen. "Yes," I said. "This year, I'll host." After we hung up, I sat in silence again. Not the hollow kind Richard and Elaine left behind. The kind that wraps around you like a soft blanket. I walked to the back door, opened it, and stood on the porch. The garden was overgrown. The swing was gone. But the stars were still in the same place. I whispered into the cold air, "I'm home, Harold." And maybe it was the wind. Or maybe it was something else. But I swear to God, the porch light flickered once, then held steady. The house knew. It had me back. Thursday came with a chill in the air. I woke up at 5, the way I used to when I had a full house and everything depended on me. But this time, I wasn't tired. I was ready. The kitchen hummed. The oven ticked warm. My hands moved without thinking, chopping, folding, baking, stirring. Years of habit, but none of the old ache. By 10, Mark pulled into the driveway. I saw his car, and for a moment I braced myself. That old flinch. But then I saw his daughter jump out of the back seat, holding a bag of cranberries, shouting, "Grandma!" And my heart, what was left of the damaged parts, mended just a little more. They came in with laughter, with coats and cold fingers and stories and music. It wasn't big. Just Mark, his wife, their 2 girls. But it was warm, and it was real. I didn't ask about Richard. Mark didn't offer. That silence was a kindness we both agreed on. We gathered around the table at 1 o'clock sharp. I served the first plate. Mark's wife brought the wine. The girls lit the candles. And when it was time to say grace, I stood. My voice didn't shake. "Last year," I said, "I thought I had lost everything. I thought I was old and in the way and easy to discard." Mark's eyes were already red. "But this year," I continued, "I know better. I'm not in the way. I'm the way this home was built. I'm not old. I'm seasoned. And I'm not easy to discard. I'm impossible to erase." Silence. Then the girls clapped, awkward and sweet, and laughter filled the room. We ate, we laughed, we passed dishes, seconds, and stories. For the first time in years, I didn't have to perform. I just was. After dinner, Mark stayed behind while the others bundled up and went to walk off the pie. He helped me wash dishes. No words at first, just warm water, plates, and the quiet comfort of being useful again. Then he said, "You know, I almost didn't call you that day. When you reached out, I didn't know if you'd even want me involved." I looked at him. "You called. That's what matters." He nodded. "Thank you for letting us back in." I placed a clean dish in the rack and smiled. "I'm not letting anyone in anymore, Mark. I'm choosing. That's what love is, really. Not obligation, not guilt, not tradition. Choice." Later that GHT, I finished one last thing. I'd put it off for weeks. Not because I was unsure. No, I'd never been clearer. But because some decisions deserve to be made in silence, with no audience but your own heart. The old will, the one Harold and I drafted 25 years ago, left everything to the boys equally. Back then, that made sense. Back then, I believed love was enough. But love, when it's used like a leash, isn't love. It's a transaction. And Richard had already made his withdrawal. So I unfolded the new form. Simple, legal, final. I crossed out the old beneficiaries. My hand didn't tremble. I wrote, "To Mark Harper and his children, I leave the house at 218 Elm Street in full. Not because it's an inheritance, but because it's been earned with kindness, presence, and integrity." I paused, then added, "To Richard Harper, I leave the lesson. You do not discard what built you and expect to inherit the pieces." I signed it, dated it, slid it into a folder marked final. When the notary came by 2 days later, she didn't ask questions. She watched me sign, stamped it, and said, "That's a strong signature." I nodded. "I've lived a strong life. I just forgot for a while." She smiled, packed up her briefcase, and wished me peace.